All right. I think we are live now. I'm just going to set up a few things here for anyone else who is on already. Welcome. Excited to have you. And I'm going to do some technical stuff to make sure that we are ready to go in a few minutes. All right. We are getting started here. We've got a few people already on, so welcome to you guys. I am just getting stuff set up so we can get going in a few minutes. But in the meantime, grab something to write on, grab your favorite drink. I've got a cup of tea right here. Wish I had a glass of wine right now. So grab something of choice. Sit back and relax and be sure you've got something to write on too. And I will get all this technical stuff set up. And if you guys can hear me and you see a Q&A box, can you type something in? And I just want to make sure it's working. So just say hello if you're on, and you can hear me just fine. All right. Just gonna write a note here. See if you guys see that. I just put a chat out to the group. So if you can see that and respond to it, just let me know. Okay. Great, cool. It's working. Wonderful. We've got Q&A live. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And we've got a couple people joining now. Very cool, excited. So we're gonna give it a couple more minutes to let other people hop on. And I totally encourage you guys to write down your questions, type them in the chat box at any time, even now. But for everyone that's already on, just say hello in the Q&A. Type in your name, where you're from, and let me say hi to you. Cool, we've got a couple people on already. Wow, this is my first time doing Google Hangout, and it's so fun. There's so many buttons to play with. Very cool. So again, we're going to give it a few minutes and then we'll get going. Awesome. We've got chats happening, questions. All right. Just a couple more minutes and we will kick things off. Hopefully you guys are having an awesome Friday. Thanks for being here. I feel like this, I'm a little biased. I feel like this is the best way to end not only just this week, but this week in particular after having paid and filed all my taxes to, I think, look forward and talk about how to earn more money in the next year on a Friday. I would rather be doing nothing else. So I'm so glad you guys are here. Oh, look, we've got Paige here from Curate. Great to have Paige on. We have Allie from Mind into Matter. So excited to see you guys. Awesome. So we're going to get going in a few minutes. Grab something to write on. Grab something to drink. I've got a nice mug of tea right here. After this webinar, I'm going to go celebrate with a glass of wine or something more appropriate for a Friday night. So get comfortable. Get your questions. I know for me, whenever I hop on a webinar or listen to a podcast or read a book, even if I get one sliver of information that's useful for me, it's worth it. So I always make sure I have something to write stuff down. So if you get that one sentence that just like cracks everything open for you, then I've done my job and hopefully this webinar is worth it for you. So, okay, we're gonna give it one more minute. We're gonna get going after that. Yeah, and we're gonna dive into making more money. What a fun topic. What a great way to end a week and a Friday. 2 days after taxes are due. I'm just really excited that you guys are here and yeah, ready to listen. Cool. If you haven't already said hi and introduced yourself, please do. Awesome. We've got Paige, we've got Rebecca, we've got Carrie, we've got Heather. Very cool. So excited to have you guys here. Very awesome. So let's go ahead and get started because there's a lot of you guys on right now and I want to be respectful of your time. We have a lot to cover. Like I already said, I'm so excited to be talking about this topic. I'm just really passionate about helping people earn more money and feeling super confident in their business because I know I wasn't for a long time. So this is one of my favorite things to talk about. It's one of my favorite things to help other entrepreneurs with. So I'm just excited to have you all here. So like I said, last chance, grab something to write with, grab a drink, get comfortable, and then anytime throughout this hangout, as I'm going through, so I'll be talking about the 5 steps to closing the deal with your client, and anytime I'm going through specifics or generalities, feel free to ask questions. Nothing is too specific. So if it's really about your circumstances, I'm happy to ask it. It's probably going to be super valuable for someone else on this webinar. So ask away anytime you hear something that I'm talking about. If you have a question, you want to dive in deeper, I will be sure to answer that as we go along. I'll have a section at the very end that's dedicated to Q&A. But and also just give me a shout out when something really gets your attention and you're like, yes, absolutely, or me here. So they don't all have to be questions, but feel free to say hello. And we've got the group chat feature off right now. And if I figure that out, I'll turn that live. But for now, I can see all of your questions and your comments. So that's good on my end. And after this webinar, I'll be sure to send out a recording so you can review it at any time you need a little confidence boost before you're pitching your next client, so you can feel good about what you're charging and how you're talking to your clients about it. So awesome. That is the logistical stuff. Glad you guys can hear me. And I just want to, I think, briefly go over a little bit of what I plan on covering today. So I'm going to pull up my screen here. For those of you who've used Google Hangout, there's so many fun, useful buttons on here, but there are so many of them. So figuring this out right now as we go, building the airplane in the air. Here we are. So this is a little bit of the outline of what we're going to be talking about. So like you already know, today's webinar is called Getting to Yes. And my goal for this webinar is not only to get you guys to yes with a client, but to really help you articulate what your own yes is. Your own yes, like what kind of clients you absolutely want to work with, who do you not want to work with, and what is your line in terms of how far that you will go to make sure that your client will say yes to the price and the value that you deserve. So there's a whole bunch of pieces around yes. I'll get into that in a second. But I am going to give you a brief introduction about my story. I know a couple of you guys already know a little bit about my background. We're going to talk about those 5 steps to closing your deal with confidence, because I think that's something we all want when we're talking to our next client and feeling confident when we say our prices out loud, even if we do know that that's what we're worth. And then I'll go a little bit into the course that I just launched a few weeks ago, You Deserve More, and talk about what's in that course, because I've been getting a lot of questions about what it actually goes through, and it ties in really nicely with what we'll talk about today. And then for everyone on the webinar today, for the first 10 people, I've got a really special bonus for you. So I will go over that a little towards the end, and then I'm going to open it up for general Q&A. I got a lot of emails from people who had questions that they wanted answers. Again, throughout the entire webinar, please feel free to ask questions. There's nothing off limits. There's nothing too specific. Ask me about my own work. Ask anything about what you're going through, and I will be happy to answer that. So, all right, now I'm back on the screen. Good. So that's a little bit of the outline for today. And like I said, my goal for you guys today is the feeling of confidence. Just I know what it feels like, and I go through it. I still go through the nerves that happen, that just like unsettling feeling every time I think about pitching a client, when I'm about to have the money conversation, where I get excited about the work, I'm excited about the project, I'm really excited about the work that I'm going to be doing. But when I think about the money conversation, it just it makes my stomach flip. And it's not something that you're ever going to be. Those nerves will never completely disappear. So there's that's a fact. And the idea, though, is how can you go into that meeting really feeling confident about everything else around it, confident that you know what you're worth, confident that you've conveyed what you're worth to your client appropriately, and being okay with either a yes or a no, but you really deserve the hell yes from a client when they see exactly what you're worth, and you're charging exactly what they're worth, and it just feels like a match made in heaven. That's what we're going for today, and to make sure that you feel confident in pitching yourself to the best of your abilities to your clients, so they can't help but say yes. And then the people who aren't a good fit for you and who can't afford what you're worth, you're okay with those no's, and you're okay saying no to people who can't afford you either. So that's what today is going to be focused on, and I'm really excited to dive in. So, okay, before we get going, I just want to give you a little bit of background about myself. Again, my name is Stephanie. Didn't say that at the beginning, but hopefully you know that because you're on the webinar. So I'm 28, I live in DC right now, and I've been running my own business for about a year and a half, and I'm sure like a lot of you guys on the webinar today did a lot of side hustling before that. So a lot of work on the side, a lot of freelance writing, and now I just have a whole suite of different ways that I make money. And I know a lot of people on this webinar and people I've gotten emails from, you know, the pie of how you earn your income comes from a lot of different sources. So for me, it's consulting, it's freelancing, it's coaching other entrepreneurs, it's drawing cartoons and selling those online. And so I have a lot of different places where I have to come up with how to price myself, and I have to pitch that to clients. Either I have an online product that I have to make sure that I convey the value about really accurately and compellingly, or I'm talking to clients and negotiating and creating proposals and things like that. So that's a little bit about where I am now, but kind of rewind a year and a half ago, and I was really struggling to figure out how to set my own prices and charge what I was worth. Just like any kind of budding entrepreneur, I didn't really receive any lessons on how to charge for my services. So even now, when I'm entering a new field and I'm trying to release a new product or work on a new project, it's always a new challenge, because every client is different, every project is different, and so having to think about, how do I price myself for this client for this type of work? It happens to me. It not only happened to me right when I was starting as an entrepreneur, but it happens to me every single time. And that's why I decided to develop a formula for myself, because I knew that I couldn't keep haphazardly setting my rates and my prices, because it wasn't working, and I was continuously undercharging for what I was worth. And the worst part about undercharging for what I was worth is knowing it and still consciously doing it. So how many of you that are on the webinar right now, just put a little note in the chat box. Let me know if you know that you could be charging more for any of your services that you have. And if you have a number in mind, please feel free to share it with me, share it with the group. But anyone out there know they could be charging more and just really don't know how to close the gap. Okay, awesome. I am getting a couple of people definitely feel like they could be charging more. Yeah, yep, absolutely. So we've got a lot of people who can, I think, relate to where I was before, but also every time I work on a new project or work with a new client, I have to be calculating my value. I have to understand what value I'm providing to that client specifically. And I really have to sink into what I'm worth for every single new piece of work that I do. So that's a little bit about where I was. Again, I'm still working on this every single time that I start a new project. I'm still getting people typing in saying, oh yeah, I totally can be charging more. So that's what we're here to do, is to close that gap between what you know you could be charging and what you actually are charging. So again, last year, and a couple of you guys know a little bit about my story, but for those of you that don't, I came up with a system, and I really worked through the psychological stuff that was holding me back from pricing myself confidently in a way that felt really good when I talked to my other clients. And last year I was able to double my rates to the point where I made over $12,000 more last year, just because I doubled my rates for the exact same amount of work, but because I understood how to value what I was charging for and how to pitch that to clients. So I look back at last year, and I look back at what $12,000 bought me, what doubling my rates bought me in terms of my lifestyle. And when I look back, it was things like being able to work 4-hour days on occasion because I needed a break. I needed a little rest, or to be able to go exercise or do yoga in the middle of the day. That's what $12,000 bought me. Or taking a whole month last year, a month and a half to go to Africa. That's what $12,000, that's what doubling and raising my rates bought me. And the biggest one of all for me was allowing myself space and time to work on my own creative projects and come up with my own creative ideas and really spend time not just on my clients, but on myself. And that was a huge gift. I just had the mental capacity and the time to do that. And it's because I raised my rates. So for those of you that know that you could be charging more, I'd love to hear in the comments as we go along what you think you could do with more money. What if you doubled your rates? What kind of money do you think that could bring into your life, and what could you do with more? And that's kind of the whole point of my course, which is not only just getting you to more, but having you really believe in the dream of more and what that means to you. So that's a little bit about my backstory, but I want to dive into the meat of what we're talking about today, because there's a lot of, like I said, psychological things that we can be our own enemy when it comes to setting our prices and charging what we're worth. So how do we get out of our own way, and how do we step into a space where we feel so ridiculously confident and excited and secure and grounded in what we're charging and how we're talking about that with our clients, that not only do we attract these natural yeses and clients who are so excited to work with us, but we actually start saying no to clients. Wouldn't that feel good? I remember when I said my first no to a client because they couldn't afford my rates. And I remember even just last week when I said a couple weeks ago no to a client because I raised my rates. And that can be a really empowering feeling too, when you start to raise your own bar. So before we dive into the 5-step process, I just want to pause for a moment, take a breath, because I know I get really excited about this topic. So I'm going to take a sip of water, but I also want to make sure that we're all on the same page when we talk about the word yes. And so the topic of this webinar is getting to yes. And maybe when you saw it, you thought, this is getting my clients to say yes. How do I get my clients to say yes? How do I get them to say, yes, I want to work with you? That's easy. That's not what we're focusing on today, because you can get any client to say yes. If you lower your prices far enough, if you offer them everything in the kitchen sink, your clients will say yes. It's not that hard. I've done it before. I have desperately wanted work from clients and been so afraid of a no that I've lowered my price and lowered my price and lowered my price. So getting your clients to say yes is not really the challenge, and that's not really why we're here today. The challenge is getting to their yes and your yes. So not just what the clients want, what makes them excited to take out their checkbook and actually sign on the dotted line and work with you, and the price that makes it, that they feel like they're getting a lot of value out of working with you, but your yes too, your yes of, yes, I want to work with this client. Yes, I'm happy about this project I'm on. Yes, I'm excited to pitch this rate because it really feels like it reflects my value. Yes, they see my value, and yes, I'm going to be really excited to do this work because I know I'm charging what I'm worth, and they see what I'm worth. So today's webinar is not about getting your clients to say yes, because that can get us in that I'm just happy to be here mentality. And I know I was guilty of that for a long time, where you know, as an entrepreneur, and if you have a little bit, or a freelancer even, and you're dealing with inconsistent income, it's really hard to say no when you have the opportunity for work in front of you. And it's really easy to get into a space of, oh, I'm just happy to have work, so it doesn't really matter the rate, and I'll lower my rates and it's okay for now. I'm just really happy to have this. Well, if you're just happy to have it continuously and you always say yes to less, you're never going to be able to step into a place where you have a sustainable, relaxed, abundant lifestyle and you're earning what you deserve. And every time you set your price lower, it's that nagging kind of chips away at a piece of you where you know more. So again, we're here today to talk about getting to all of the yeses, not just your clients. So closing the deal with confidence with your client, getting to their yes, getting to yours. What would that feel like? Type in some words that you think would come to mind if you could close a deal with a client. Name your price, and you would feel what? In the best case scenario, what would that feel like? Okay, so I'm getting a couple things in the chat box here. Grounded, confident, secure, powerful, happy, awesome. Yes, that is exactly what yes feels like when you get to your client's yes and you get to your yes at the same time. When you get that enthusiastic hell yes on both sides, where you're excited to work with this project because it really conveys your value and you're charging what you're worth, and your client's really happy because they understand the value too. So how do we do that? We talked about what that feels like, but how do we actually get there? So I am going to pull up another slide here. And okay, here we go. I'm gonna make sure that's sharing. Great. Okay. So how do we get to that yes? How do we get our clients to see exactly what we're worth? And the idea here is closing the gap. And it's closing the gap between what you're actually worth and what you and your clients think you're worth. That is the name of the game when it comes to pricing, which is taking the time to calculate what you're worth on the project that's in front of you, all of the value you bring, your skills, your experiences, your unique perspective on this particular project, how much it's worth to your client. It's between that value of what you're actually worth and closing the gap between that and what you might think you're worth, which might be lower than what you're actually worth, and what your clients think you're worth. And it's not about convincing your clients, but it's getting them really, really clear so they can see all of the incredible value that you bring. So that is the gap that we want to close today. That is what we're focused on, which is the difference between what you're actually worth and what you think you're worth and what your client is worth. And that is the crux of every sort of proposal you've ever written, any sort of marketing or website design. Anytime you pitch yourself out loud when you're sitting across from a potential client, this is the core of what we're dealing with here, which is your actual value and your perceived value. So let's get into the 5 steps of actually closing the deal with confidence while you're here on this webinar today. And I'm going to walk through these 5 steps, and then we're going to kind of look at them as a whole and see how they can help you with your next client meeting. So let me make sure that my screen is still sharing. Wonderful. Awesome. Technology is working. That is my favorite thing in the world, especially when it's new. So let's get into this. Let's get into the 5 steps on closing the deal and getting to the yes, your yes and your client's yes. So the first step of this is calculating the true value of what you're offering. And this has nothing to do with what other people are charging. This has nothing to do with what you can find on Google for the services you're providing. This has nothing to do with the service or the thing you're delivering, and it has everything to do with the value that you're providing, because it's very easy to go online and say, what should I charge for freelance writing? Or what does a coach charge in DC, my city, for example, or to ask around for to your friends and your colleagues or people in your field what they're charging. That is, that's a fine place to start if maybe you're just starting out. Like if I was starting a photography business tomorrow, I would ask a photographer friend what she was charging, and I would start there. But the idea is that you are so unique in the skills and value and experience that you bring to the table for this particular client, for whatever new project that you're launching, that there's no way that you can find out what you're worth by asking around and Googling. It's a fine starting point, but this is an exercise, again, that I do on every single project that I start with. In the past, it's what helped me double my rates, but also I know that I'm gaining unique experience and skills every single day that I do new work, and I have a completely different skill set and perspective and resume than anyone else out there. So the first step is, before diving into the work or pitching yourself or really naming a price based on someone else's price, to calculate what you're offering and your unique skills. And I go into this, I take, there's 2 or 3 days in my course that dive in how to unpack and uncover your unique skills and experience, but it's coming up with the laundry list of everything that you bring to the table that's related or not even seemingly related to the project at hand and the client that you want to serve. And so it's understanding that piece of your unique value, and it's the combining that with your client's ability to see that value, how much they want that, and their willingness to invest in that value. So again, you're not just operating in a silo here, you're trying to sell your services to another person. So it's the combination of all the amazing skills, experiences, and the unique angle, the creativity you bring to the table, the synthesizing of everything that you've ever done and that you bring to the table with the right client that sees what you offer, that really wants your services, that really wants your value and getting a return on their investment, and a client that's willing to invest in that. And that's the intersection of your value, and that is the key to understanding what you're worth, so that you can stop Googling, you can stop asking your friends and colleagues what to charge, and you can really calculate your value. Now, again, I'm staying really high level here. I go into this in a lot more detail in my course, but I just wanted to give you guys a framework to consider as you're getting ready to pitch a service to a client. So that's the first step here. The second step, we're going to go back to the gap. So once you understand your true value and you sit down and you calculate, well, what is it that I bring to the table? What is the client getting out of this? What is the return they would get on this investment? And how much is this actually worth? This is where we need to close the gap. This is where you acknowledge that there's a gap that does exist, and it's time to close that with the right language in a proposal, with the right copy language on a website, with the right words and phrases and conversations to be had with a client if you're doing it in person. So when you calculate your value, again, not your services, but what your value really is and what kind of return your client could get on that value, it's time to close the gap between what that value is and how it's perceived, what you think you're worth, and also what the client thinks you're worth at that time. And this has, again, to do with marketing, using the right language, making sure that you acknowledge there is a gap between these two things, between what you're worth and what your client sees. And to sit down and take the time and write down where you think there might be a disconnect. I did this with the other day with a project, which is, I think that I know it's very obvious this client's going to get a lot out of working with me. It was a coaching client. And so I sat down and I wrote, here's what I think. I know they'll get this out of me. I know they could earn this much more money. And I know that they could, the kind of time they would save, the hassle, all of the things I know. where is it that I think they might not see the value yet? Where is it kind of shrouded? Because, and I'm sure for those of you that have been working with clients for a while, you know the feeling of when you've already started working with someone and you get an email from them or a phone call and they're like, wow, you saved my butt, or I can't believe you saved me this much money, or you helped me earn this much money, or you changed my life. And after they've started working with you, they totally and completely see your value. They're completely bought in because they love what you're doing. They've gotten so much value out of what you've provided. And how do you take that moment after the client's already worked with you and bring it to the point of the conversation where you're actually pitching yourself? So the exercise here is writing down where you think that gap exists. Are they not seeing the outcome clearly? Are they not bought into their future? Have they not sat down and calculated the numbers that they could get from working with you? You know, even as a freelance writer, I remember after I was done working with a client for 2 years and left that position, yeah, he said to me, you know that your articles probably got us $200 or $250 in revenue. And I just wanted to thank you for that. And I was blown away. And this was also when I was undercharging for my freelance writing. But the fact is that I could have charged more, and I really didn't know what they were earning as a return on the other end of it. So again, it's about after you work with the client, how do you bring that to the beginning of the conversation when you're pitching yourself to that client? So again, first it's calculating your value, not just your services, but really what's the value you're going to provide to a client, what's the return they'll get, and then acknowledging there's a gap between what they see and what they'll actually get, and closing it with the right language. Now the third step, and again, I'm keeping this really high level and I go into a lot of the details on how to actually do this in my course, but I want to give you guys the framework today. The third step here is giving your clients more options for more yeses. And, you know, we talked earlier about the idea of getting your client to yes and making sure that you are comfortable and confident with the client that you're working with, the rate you're working with, getting to your yes as well. And so what does this look like? So the idea here is not to just present your client with an offer, a black and white, one time, here's my rate, take it or leave it. You know, it's either yes or no, it's my way or the highway. That can end a conversation right there. It's either in their budget or it's not, and it's time to walk away. And so if you really want to work with this client and you really want to enter into a new space and you want to make things work because they have their own restraints and constrictions, and then you have your own value, and so you want to uphold that. So one way to do this is to give your clients more options. And that can take a lot of different forms. It can be a tiered package. So you can say to your clients, listen, here's the basics here, but I also have a high-end package if you want more hands-on one-on-one services, so that they're choosing between two different options instead of just yes or no. Another way to do this is to provide almost kind of a buffet of options to choose from, which is if you want to work with me on this kind of project, or this kind of word count if you're writing, or this kind of support, you can kind of pick and choose depending on your budget. So the idea here is, how do you come up with enough options so it's not yes or no? It's not that old way of thinking, which is, how do I make myself affordable so I don't scare away clients? It's this new way of thinking, which is, how do I make myself so obviously valuable and give my client enough options and incentives that they can't help but say yes. So giving your clients the array of different ways to work with you, so that it's not, again, about yes or no, but which yes do I want? Which yes is right for me? And then you're not compromising your rates. Then you're not compromising your value. And then you're giving them options to consider. And they're already in the mindset of, how do I make this work instead of can I make this work? So that is step 3. We've calculated your value. We've closed the gap between describing what you're worth and making sure that your client really sinks into that. And then this third step about conveying your options. Now, the fourth step, and we went into this a little bit earlier, is defining your yes. And this is preparing for the conversation with a client. This is now that you know what you're worth, now that you've really conveyed what you're worth to your client, now that you've laid out your options, what is your yes? What is your line? And like I said earlier, if you always say yes to less, you'll never have more. So, when you're starting out and you're just building experience, again, that it's okay to start somewhere. But if you want to raise your bar with how much you earn and you want to raise your rates, you're going to have to draw a line in the sand of what your yes looks like. And that can mean coming up with a list of scenarios in which you'll only work with a client. So I have a list of 3 things: the client itself, like how good the relationship is, do I enjoy working with the client, the amount, the rate. So I have a baseline that I will not go underneath. I turned a client down that I really love a couple weeks ago because I just cannot, I'm not going to lower my rate because I drew a line in the sand for what I would charge. And the third is the project, because I still do free work on occasion when I really like the cause and I really like the work and I'm really happy to contribute and add something to my portfolio. So for me, it was about drawing the lines with, well, what is the combination of a good client, a good rate, and a good project that I'm willing to negotiate on any of those pieces? Because we're all going to make exceptions. We're all going to, this is such an art. It's not really a science, and every single project is going to be different, but you have to be really clear in what boundaries you want to draw in the sand so that you can define your yes, that when it comes time to a client pushing back, you're confident and an okay with saying no because you know what you're worth, and you know the only types of clients that you're willing to work with. So coming up with this list, this has been a great way for me to vet who I'm willing to work with, who I'm not, and what I'm okay with in terms of making exceptions. So my yeses, when I get a yes or when I'm excited to work with a client, I know how that feels. I can imagine doing the work. I'm already starting to dream of what that work will be like. I'm brainstorming possibilities with them even before we sign a contract. They see my value. I clearly see my value in this project, and I feel really comfortable setting the rate that I deserve at a high rate. And so my yes, I know how my yeses feel. And I've brainstormed that list a few times as well. I'll keep adding to that one. I also know how my exceptions feel. There are exceptions when you feel slighted or cheap, and those are the exceptions you want to avoid, and those are the exceptions that I avoid at all costs. But there are good exceptions too, which is an interesting project or one that you feel compelled to do, but it's okay if you, it's maybe not your favorite client, or you decide to do it for free, a small project. But again, making sure that you define what your yes looks like and how that feels to you is really important, so that when you do get to the conversation that you're pitching with your client, you feel comfortable in knowing how far you'll bend. And everyone is, whether you're working with a coaching client one-on-one or you're working with a corporation, everybody has a budget. They're going to negotiate with you. So just knowing what your line is really important before you get into the conversation. So those are the first 4 steps. And the final step of getting to yes is embracing the no, which sounds kind of funny. But again, when you've done all that work to calculate your value, to really convey that to your clients, to give them all the options they could dream of, and to draw the line in the sand in where you will say yes and where you won't, then it comes time to embracing the no. Because the more you say no, when you say no to a client that just really feels cheap and doesn't want to pay what you're worth, then you're, again, reaffirming what you are worth, and you're making room in your life for a client that will come along, whether they're there today or not, that will pay what you're worth, and a client that you're excited to work with, and a client that you feel amazing doing this project at the rate that you're charging. So embracing the no and being okay with no, not only just from their end, but your end as well. And again, if you've given them options and you've really conveyed your value and it's still a no from them, you have done your work. And it's also a lesson to take back with, well, what was it that I could have, how could I have conveyed the value of what I'm providing even more? Or how could I have built the confidence and calculated my own value and taken the time to really sink into the fact that I know what I'm providing. I know the value that I'm providing to this person. So I feel more confident and comfortable in these conversations. So the fifth and final step to getting to yes is actually embracing the no's. So I'm going to take a quick pause from the slideshow here and check in with you guys and see how everyone's doing. So that was just a lot of information. I'm really, oh, you know what? Oh, I'm sorry, you guys can't see the screen. Sorry, that went away. So I'll be sure to send the slides out afterwards if you guys had trouble seeing the screen. That chat didn't appear. That's too bad. So I went through the 5 steps: calculating your value, closing the gap by conveying your value and giving your clients more options for more yeses, and then defining what your yes is and embracing your no. So by doing all of those things, that is going to get you to the point where you can come into a conversation and actually feel confident in the value you're offering. You've conveyed your value to the clients, you've given them more options, and you've really defined where your line is, so you're okay with saying no to this client, but yes to the ones that are going to pay what you're worth. So I was going to share a screen here, but I think we're having a little technical difficulties in doing that. So I am just going to keep rolling. We're just going to make this happen. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the course that I just launched a few weeks ago to actually help you do the things that we talked about today. And if you guys haven't seen it already, you can go to youdeservemore.co. Again, I'm going to send out this presentation after the webinar, since it looks like the screen didn't share while I was talking. But I've got a couple screenshots of what this course looks like. So this, if you're ready, if you're thinking now is the time for me to finally raise my rates, I know it's time, I know I could be charging more, I know I'm really eager, I just don't know how to do it, this is what this course is about. This course, and I'm going to be totally honest, this course is a lot of work. It's a 7-day intensive course. Each day you'll get an email from me, you'll get video instruction, and you're going to get a 10 to 14 page reading assignments, exercises, and you are going to be put to work. But this is how we get to some of the things we talked about earlier about finally calculating your true value. What kind of options make sense for you to provide to your clients? How do you close the gap and actually pitch yourself to clients? It takes work. 90% of this is really psychological. So this course isn't for the faint of heart, but it's for the people, like a lot of you on this webinar that I've heard from already, who are really serious in charging what they're worth. So I'm getting a couple questions here. Cool. We're going to save a few of these for Q&A. Okay, awesome. So again, this 7-day course is going to take you through everything that you need to know to get to the place where that we just talked about. And you can take a look at the course outline on the website, youdeservemore.co. But before we get to Q&A, I just wanted to say to those of you that are on the webinar that I've got a special bonus. And again, since the screen sharing is not working, I'm going to make sure I say this really clearly. So for any of those of you who've taken my free 6-day course on my website, and you're interested and you're ready and you're finally at a place where you know that you're ready to take the next step and finally start earning what you deserve and raising your rates once and for all, I've got a great offer for anyone. For the first 10 people today who want to take my course, I'm going to give you $50 off the complete course package. Type in the code webinar50. It's all one word, webinar50. And I'm getting some amazing comments right now from people who say, this course is so worth it. I can attest to how transformational it is. That's so awesome. Thanks for sharing that. But for anyone who's interested who hasn't yet taken the course yet, this bonus is for you, $50 off either course package. I've got 2 options on the website. And the code is webinar50. And this is for the first 10 people only. So I'm going to be sending this webinar out to folks on my list afterwards. So if this is for you too, feel free to shoot me an email after this. But this offer is specifically for you guys. I know that since you're on this webinar, you're definitely ready for this. You're ready for more. You know it's time to finally break through and raise your rates. And I'm just getting so many awesome comments here for people who've taken the course. You're going to be blown away. Oh, I love hearing this. I love it. And I've got some testimonials on my website if you guys are curious in reading those as well. So thank you everyone who's commented. And now it's time for Q&A. So again, please, nothing is too specific. Ask anything that you want. I'm going to scroll through some of these questions here. People who say they definitely know they could charge more and feeling guilty knowing who your clients are and that they're not making as much as they want. Yeah, that's a really good one. I know that's not a question, but I'm reading some of the comments here, which is reconciling that feeling of feeling guilty when you're helping a client and you know how much they're making. That goes back to the value equation that we talked about earlier, which is how do I calculate the value that I'm providing a client? And in this moment, they might have a certain amount of income, but what kind of value, intangible or tangible, financial or not, are you providing for this client? Because a lot of the guilt, and I know I've felt this before too, is associated with they're paying for a service and this is their current circumstances. And it's just a direct exchange of money. And when you look at it that way, it can really feel unfair and it can feel really, you can feel really guilty for charging people more when you know what they're earning. So I would just really recommend focusing on the value that you're providing, the return you provide a client. And I would say that's the best way to get over kind of that guilt. So I've got another question. I've got a question from Claudine who says, my main hurdle in getting clients to saying yes is getting them to realize the value that they're paying for. It seems no one wants to pay for design work. As soon as they hear that 3 to 4 days of work might cost them $700, they run. Well, that's a really great question. It goes back to a lot of what I was saying about conveying value and also options. So maybe this is an opportunity for you to repackage the way that you're delivering your services. 3 to 4 days of design work, they're paying for work. At that point, you're showing them the service and not the value that they're getting. If they're going to pay a certain lump sum for a website that will attract X number, more leads, or they're paying for an outcome, it's taking away from the service you're providing and really reframing it into the value that you're providing, and maybe repackaging it, because maybe that 3 to 4 days isn't resonating with clients, and you need to think about a different way to package your services and different options so that they're not running away. It's not that yes or no. It's how do we make this happen? So that's a great question, Claudine. So we've got another question here. Any tactics for raising rates for existing clients you've already signed on at a lower rate? That's a great question. A lot of this depends on the timing in which you signed your client. You don't want to pull the wool over their eyes and having just signed them a month ago and and saying, oh, by the way, your rates are changing. So there's obviously, using your best judgment in terms of timing. Again, 6-month marks, quarterly, yearly, those are always very universally accepted times to reevaluate any sort of business relationship. So that's just a quick note on timing. But the other piece is I would go back to the idea of packages, which is when you think about you've signed on a client at a current rate, it's technically a package. Even if you said you didn't offer it as a specific package, think of it as the old you, the old package you were providing. And a lot of times what I say to clients is that I'm actually phasing out that package, or I'm phasing out those, that old service, and I'm rolling all my clients into this new thing. It's a higher rate, but as an existing client, I'll give you this, XYZ bonus. Not something too big, because you don't want to give away your value there either, but considering a special bonus for them rolling over to the higher package rate. But I would say a lot of it is just that language about considering, I'm rolling over my rates, or I'm increasing my rates, or that old package is expiring. I did it with a freelance writing client. I said, I really like working with you, and I'm really getting picky about the clients I work with, and so I'm raising my rates, and I'm really hopeful that you can meet those rates because I really like having you in my portfolio of work. So those are a lot of different options if you want to raise your rates, but you've already signed on with an existing client. And then, if it's a corporate client, making sure that that you can revisit a contract. I know I got locked into like a 1.5-year contract, so that's set in stone. I really can't negotiate those rates. But to make sure that you do have check-in points, so that you have a smaller kind of window of time in which you're working at a specific rate. Great questions, guys. So I've got another one here. A client came back to me with the range they can do after seeing my rate, which they said they absolutely can't do. So there's a big gap, but I want the work. Do I pitch back a rate in the middle, or do I trust their sincerity that this is all they can do? So this is a great question. And this is what happened, which is you named your rate. Clients named theirs. This is the beginning of the negotiation process. And they said they absolutely can't do it. So coming back to the middle and saying, would this be reasonable? Because how can we meet somewhere in the middle? Because there's a big gap between what I've researched and what I've done and what you're proposing. And again, a client that either an individual client or a corporate client, they might be in the game of negotiating. They might be they're looking out for their bottom line. They're a client that even as an individual wants to save money and wants to get the most value, and so they might be just a negotiator. So coming back and saying, you guys are on totally different ends, but can we talk about a way to find a middle ground so that this would work for both of us? And then the question is, so it's not necessarily about sincerity, which could be a really subjective word, but essentially your value is this, their budget is this, or what they say they can't pay is this. Is there a way for them to meet you in the middle? And if not, that's when you can reconsider, well, what are the clients that I really want to work with? Where do I draw my line in the sand, and how do I define my yes? What are the way, like if this is the type of client that you want to be working with, even in general, because they might not have the budget range. For me, I'm trying to move away from the nonprofit world or government contracts, because there's literal limitations on what I can charge. So in the short term, it definitely doesn't hurt to try to meet somewhere in the middle, because you guys both know that you have a huge gap between what you've proposed. And if you really want to make it work, and it sounds like both of you guys do, asking for a middle number doesn't sound unreasonable. Settling for their super low number, it's not going to make you feel good, and it's not going to let the client know that, hey, I'm sticking up. I know what I'm worth, and I'm still lowering my value for you, but I'm willing to do it as an exception. So I would just say, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, which is defining your yes, especially for this client, but then also any future clients that you have, making sure that you know what is your absolute minimum? When are you willing to walk away? And if this is in the short term, it's totally okay. And lesson learned, you know, I've learned so many lessons. So in saying yes to lower rates and pitching myself higher. So take that for what it's worth in the moment as well. These are awesome questions. Great. So I don't see any more questions here. Hopefully everyone's got the ones that they've asked. I've got some questions about, you know, I'd like to ask for a raise, but I'm afraid of scaring my clients off. I've been doing steady work with them. Again, if you love the client and if the client loves working with you, they obviously see the value of what you're providing. You know, don't be afraid of saying getting an absolute no and having someone totally abandon you. In reality, if they're happy with your work, if you like working with them, they're going to make it work. And asking for a raise, again, in these really logical increments of, you know, we've been working together for 6 months or we've been working together for a year, is totally reasonable. People do it all the time. You might be surprised how quickly they'll say yes. So it doesn't hurt to ask, because if they're a good client, they're going to try to make it work. And if they really can't make it work, then that's your chance to really consider, this is a client that I want and deserve in the long term, because I want people to pay what I'm valued at. So it's a great question. Great question. So we're wrapping up on the hour here. For those of you that were on the webinar, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to email out the slide deck. Sorry if you didn't get to see that during the actual webinar itself. I'll send out this video recording, audio recording. And if you're interested in the course, again, first 10 people to use this code webinar50, you'll get $50 off either of the course packages that I've got on there. I was just so happy that there's a couple people on the webinar today who've taken the course, who think it's transformational and are blown away by it. That just makes me happy that you guys are really in this and doing the work to make it happen. And if anyone else out there, if you're ready to do the work, if you're finally ready to break through that ceiling that you know that's over you and start charging what you're worth and raising your rates, and saying yes to more and not yes to less, then totally take advantage of this offer. Webinar 50 is the code. I really hope to see you in the course. I know it's changed a lot of people's lives already, and I am totally confident that it will change yours. So thank you everyone for joining me on the webinar today. Have a beautiful Friday. It's so amazing out in DC right now. I'm really excited to get outside. Go celebrate yourself for taking a big step in even just learning and thinking and talking about raising your rates. That's a big one. So, and again, if you have any questions about this webinar, about the course, feel free to send me an email, and we will chat soon. So take care, everyone. And here is to earning more and what you deserve. Woohoo. All right. Thanks, guys.